Welcome, everyone, to Mastering LLMs. I'm your host, Kevin DeWalt, founder and CEO of Perlego. Each week, we dive into Gen AI development topics to try to help all of us who are in this business get smarter. And today, I'm joined by Shanif Danani, founder of Locusive. I first discovered Shanif's work on LinkedIn, where his content really stood out for me because he shares specific actionable techniques for solving real business problems with LLMs, which is very different from the stream of useless drivel that pretty much populates my LinkedIn feed. So, if you're a founder, engineer, product manager, anybody in this business or thinking about getting into it, I think you're going to get a lot of valuable insights from Shanif today, as I know I have. So, Shanif, welcome to Mastering LLMs.
What's up, Kevin? It is great to be here, and also thank you for reaching out. I've also been following a lot of your work, like we discussed. So it's great to be able to chat with you live.
Yeah, ditto. I'm really looking forward to this as well. I think we could probably fill up about 3 hours of conversations. We both got on the call a few minutes early, and I think we just had to stop talking because we realized that we were going to start telling them, like, we were going to jump into the good stuff that people want to hear. So, but let's jump into it. So before we begin, can you tell us a little about yourself, your background, your company,
Yeah,
Locusive, how you got, let's hear your story, man.
yeah, I appreciate that. I like to say I'm a techie. So I've been in the world of software engineering for a long time now, more than 20 years, and I very quickly sort of gravitated towards machine learning engineering as I was doing that. Mostly in the world of startups. So built a company a while back, which was one of the world's first ad tech platforms. I was the lead engineer there. We built a system that was serving about 100,000 ads and handling 1 million ad requests every second.
Wow.
Sold that to Twitter. Worked there for a while as a data scientist, product guy, machine learning engineer. I like to mix it up. And eventually started Locusive, which is what I'm working on today, which is really just trying to help people use LLMs to better retrieve and analyze their data, sort of act as an assistant to them as they go through their business and workflows.
Okay, so then is it like LLMs meets business intelligence type of? Is that a good way of some? Maybe that's not the tagline you would look for, but in terms of like for a technical audience, would that be a good
Yeah.
way of thinking about it?
Had you asked me like 2 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, for sure. What's funny, I've learned
Yeah,
in startup world is business intelligence does not really sell. So it's much more
yeah,
of like, it's sad, but it's the truth. And there's a lot of incumbents. What we are is basically more of an assistant or an agent that lets you take actions. And we're actually launching within SaaS products now. So if you're a software developer, you can plug our system into your product, let your users take actions, let your users pull data, find information. So it's a little bit more of like that assistant type of model.
got it. Okay, yeah, so I can see that makes sense. Yeah, and I would agree. Like the word business intelligence is so like over. Like
Yeah.
it means a million things to a million different people. Nobody knows what it is, but one thing I do know is it does not sell. Nope.
I did. I didn't mention actually after Twitter, I started a predictive analytics and business intelligence company, which we eventually shut down. So I know very well how little it sells, which is
Yeah,
why we went this direction.
yeah, that's excellent. So how long have you been working on the company?
We started last year, so it's for those watching after the recording, it's September right now. So I've been working on it for about 18 months. Started back in like March, February last year. Really just starting to try to understand what people needed, work in more of a consultative manner. Found something that works as a product, or hopefully works as a product, and started working on that.
Got it. And so you're bootstrapped, self-funded, sort of like all founder funding at this point, right? You don't have investors. Is that true?
Yeah, it's all founder funded, but I don't know when this is going out. We're actually kicking up for a fundraise probably in October, and so we'll see
Nice.
if we can raise a little bit of money. But thus far, I made the mistake a long time ago of raising too much, raising VC money at the wrong time. Didn't want to make that mistake again until we found sort of a problem that's worth solving, and we think we're there now.
Boy, yeah, I've got years of my life lost in that mistake, and I think a lot of founders can relate to that one. Yeah, one of the worst
Yeah,
mistakes you can make is thinking that life's going to get easier after you get the
uh,
check, and it
yeah,
does
that's the
not.
truth.
And it
We
does.
could probably have a whole other podcast just about that too, or a whole
Yeah,
other live stream.
I mean, I guess what I'd maybe just one point of content to comment on that because I'm sure people would be wondering is, but it's like you raise money when you need to go faster and when it makes sense to do that. And premature scaling is what really kills
Uh,
most startups. That's what kills all of us, and it can take a long time. And I think also what people don't really realize is whenever you raise that round, the bar for your exit goes
yeah,
higher just because the terms. And honestly, my friends that have done it 10 years goes by in a blink. I mean, you're looking at a lifetime commitment. This is not, this is
yeah.
not like going and getting a job. This is major commitment of a long term of your life.
It really is. You know, this is my third startup now, and I'm sort of telling myself, look, I'm going to do this probably for a decade or more, so I have to really like what I'm doing. And it does mean you have to commit to something. But when you raise VC funds, sometimes that's harder to do, which is why we waited for a while.
Yeah. So I'm guessing I'm at least 10 years older than you. So I had the same thought 10 years ago. And you know what? I'm not doing what you're doing again. So that's why I do services work. So anyway, I'll invest
Yep.
in the company. So I totally get it. All right. Let's jump into some of the nuts and bolts about building with LLMs. And so can you tell me about like a little bit about the like, I mean, you said you had a data science background, so you obviously had like the technical
Yeah.
foundation in software engineering. So you had all like the foundational stuff. You didn't just wake up and take a Udacity
Yeah.
course and learn about software. So you've been doing this a long time. What was it like jumping into working with LLMs and that kind of learning experience? I'm
Yeah.
asking because Justin and I were talking this morning, like, how long does it take somebody to get, like, how long does it take a software engineer to get proficient in building systems with LLMs? And the difficult thing about answering that question is once you've done it is you don't know what it's like to turn off the switches in your head and know what you don't know. But anyway, I was just curious of your opinion on that.
Yeah, I actually remember seeing a couple of posts from you about how you guys had to do a lot of NLP work in the past and how it was a lot tougher. And I also had to do that too. Today, it's totally different. And you
Yeah.
guys might have seen the same thing. Like these AI providers, LLM providers have really well documented APIs and they have a really clean system. And as a software guy, like just putting on my software hat, it's super easy to
Yeah.
just get into their systems and just start sending messages. All I had to do, even though I've built up like deep networks in the past and I've done large, models, not quite like this, all I had to do to get plugged in was read a few docs,
Mm-hmm.
watch a couple of videos, and then start building like a couple of backend services. So from the software side of things, it's the barrier to entry has become really, really low.
Yep.
Like everything, it's easy to get started, probably a little bit more difficult to master because, we'll talk about this soon. LLMs are not perfect. They're far from doing what people think they're doing. So really easy to get started as a software guy. You can build something in an hour or two, and that's kind of what makes it really fun and
Yeah.
kind of joyful as well.
I totally agree. Yeah, the way I like to describe it is like it is incredibly fast to get in like an 80 or an 85% solution. I sure we'll get into like the
Yeah.
rubber meets the road and that last 10 to 15%. That's when
Yes.
things get hairy. I'm sure we'll get into that. Yeah, just on that note, one of the things I run into with our clients who are recruiting, like, hey, we're getting into LLMs and I've got 5 guys with NLP background as resume here. I'm like, can you take a look at these? And I'm like, nope. Like these are the wrong people. It's like, oh no, I got a data scientist. Like, okay, this isn't data scientist. This is not machine learning.
Yeah.
This is not deep learning. This is not NLP. And so the term we use is we call it AI systems engineer, where it's a combination of like systems level software engineering and then the experimental mindset of a data scientist. But if it's your background is Jupyter Notebook, scikit-learn, like narrow, like a lot of, it's like anything else. The top 25% of people are going to learn whatever it is, and that's really who's making progress in this. Sorry, my camera froze for a second, but I'm just going to keep going. But it's not but like having a data scientist background is not going to help you build systems with LM. And in fact, I find that it's often a lot of data scientists through their academic, their research and their training, they're really good at optimizing for a narrow problem. And so they're very good at making it more and more. How do I more narrowly define this problem, write the features? And with LMs, you got to think big. You're thinking systems level interaction with this people. You have to have the kind of view that you have when you're building your products. And that I just don't think a lot of companies are aware of that yet. And so a lot of products are stuck because they got the wrong team. And anyway, this is something I think like it's new and people will figure this out, but we're in the early stages of it.
100% agree. I can't add anything more to that. So totally, if you're doing this, look at it from a software perspective first.
Yeah, I'd say that as we get better at, we just had this conversation this morning. It's like who are we really looking for to scale the company? And we're more and more leaning towards the software engineering side, like hiring good software engineers than people of a data scientist. It's nothing against data scientists. In fact, if you're a great data scientist, you could probably become a great software engineer. So like anything else. So, all right, so let me just jump into a couple other questions that we got here. So in Locusive, how much of the product you spend working with unstructured or structured data, or do you kind of like, it doesn't matter, whatever the customer has, we can handle it?
It's we're working towards that point where whatever data source you got, we'll be able to handle it. At the moment, it's basically let's say a 70-30 split. So 70% of our customers actually want us to do SQL queries and database analysis, which is kind of interesting because I was under the impression that was sort of a solved problem, but a lot of people have this issue. 30% is much more like Q&A type of stuff you do with ChatGPT, just augmented by injecting your content and your documents.
RAG style.
From our perspective.
The way most people
exactly.
RAG. Yeah. Okay.
I would have expected RAG to be like sort of much more prevalent, but when you think about it, what we always set out to do was build a real system that could handle real business problems. The RAG stuff is great, but it's not the most pressing things that we've seen people have, which is kind of interesting. And you would have thought that actually the RAG stuff is actually easier. It used to be the case, you guys probably saw it, where unstructured text was hard as heck to deal with.
Exactly.
And so today, dealing with structured data becomes challenging because LLMs have to pull the data first, and sometimes that can require very structured queries. And then they have to make sense of the data. But in order to make sense of it, you've got this tabular information or this row-based information that's not ideal for an LLM. So it's a long way of me saying, we've had to come up with a few techniques to help LLMs work better with structured data and not so much with the unstructured stuff.
Yeah, well said, Shanif. And I was actually, we ran through the same process like a year ago, and I was surprised at how good it was with the unstructured stuff, because that was always the biggest problem. But the structured data is really the challenge. And I've said this again and again and again to people, but one of the things that's really holding back enterprise adoption of LLMs is the ability to deal with structured data, because most enterprise data is sitting around in databases. And it's messy. You go into a financial services company and they've got 10 different tables, all that have the column names, cust, right? That was written over like 10 years. Nobody knows what it is. The last guy was an idiot. I mean, the usual stuff of like defining what the data is. And so as we're thinking about talking with LLMs, maybe just to put a finer point on this, we're talking about using the LLM to go from some sort of either natural language query or some generalized request, converting that into a SQL query that can get the data out of the database and run the interpretation and present the information. So my buddy, so I know somebody's watching this going, well, I watched the Medium blog post about how LLMs can write SQL, and this seems like a solved problem. Why isn't this easy?
Gosh, man. This has been the bane of my existence for the past 8 months. Not bane, because it's been really fun to work on. But, with SQL, you actually need to reason quite a bit. You need to have a lot of background knowledge, first of all, as you guys have talked about. What are these databases? What's in them? How do they relate to each other? And nobody has the same database structure, which means that you can't standardize anything. What you have to do is you have to reason. And despite how good LLMs are, their reasoning is not great. It's getting better. Which means you can't rely on an LLM to come up with the right SQL query by itself. So you have to find techniques to work around that. We've developed a few techniques which have worked well, which I'm happy to sort of list here. I would say when we first started working on this, what we did was we started injecting the schema into every prompt, and that got us maybe 15% of the way.
That was ours first too. You mean the schema, like the table creation schema? Table
creation, and then the columns, like the types of the columns where they relate to. That's fine.
But that was again, our first shot too.
It's like you can't really reason on that. It's a little help, but it's not that best. And then what we did was we thought about, well, what if you have freeform text that tells the LLM this is what you need to do? We call that a reference guide. That got us to like 35%. I'm sure you guys have a very similar way. Then what we did was
so just make sure, like maybe for the audience, I think you and I both know we're saying. So it's like this is freeform text. Like you have an LLM or a human annotated is looking at your table and is generating descriptions of what is in the data, what the column is that could be read and interpreted by an LLM and reasoned through, and along with the SQL. Is that what you're saying?
That's actually a great question. So I forgot to like clarify. So we have that, but what we actually built was a feature where you as a database admin or you as the software guy who built your database can go in and tell the LLM instructions of what to do. So for example, hey, look, this column actually should be joined to this column, or when you see a particular request like this, you have to make sure you join these 5 tables. And it's literally freeform instructions that you as the DB admin can go in and tell the LLM, hey, look, keep these in mind.
So, all right. So now I'm starting to appreciate the value proposition with your problem. So instead of having engineers like on our side, we're doing all that with our engineers to figure all that out, to look up a database. You're providing the power of the customer to do that description level, so that, okay, much better approach as a product company for sure.
Yeah. And like I said, that helped, but it only got us to like 35% of the way.
Yep.
The thing that really got us a little bit farther, about let's say 70-80% of the way, was these what I call example queries, where basically you, as again the system guy or the DB guy, tell the system, basically provide a huge list, and you say, look, when somebody asks about this, run this query. When somebody asks about this, run this query. That allows the system to do a couple of things. It allows our system to find the most relevant queries and present that at query time, so that you can find the most relevant things. And then it also allows the system to learn from different examples. So it's a long way of me saying, I think this question has sort of gone on long enough. It's a long way of me saying there's a lot of things you have to do to get an LLM to be able to query a system properly. And it's because every system is different and it's not standardized and it needs to reason.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned on LinkedIn, but I had a number of email messages come in and conversations with people recently, like, "Hey, how do I get it to work with my databases?" And and so there's another topic I think we're going to run into is like, what about context size limitations? You have to go like multiple tables. So yeah. Right. So, what I love about this stuff, Shanif, is like, I look online and it's like, here's how you make LLMs write SQL. And they have a table generated by an LLM, and they got an LLM reasoning across it. And I'm like, have you worked at a company? Yeah. 10 records. Have you worked at a company? Like,
yeah, really. And you see a lot of, I mean, not to go too off track, but we were talking about this at the start of the show. You see a lot of these guys who thought that they suddenly understood everything, and then they started coming out with these blog posts and things, and they probably made a few $1,000s. But like building for the real world, you have to develop a lot of techniques that, maybe you don't know how to do yet.
Yes.
To your point, that context window, man, that was like, I've done probably, I don't know, 80 hours, 100 hours, 120 hours worth of work just optimizing context windows. I'm sure you guys have used LangChain. I'm sure we both have strong opinions about LangChain. I did not use it to start with. I don't think we should be using it, which means I have to come up with my own algorithm for optimizing our context window.
I have a stronger opinion, but go ahead.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bad idea. I think it will make your product worse. And I think because I'm writing a lot about this on the methodology we're building for building these kind of solutions for our clients.
PDD.
But it's like the BDD, PDD, performance-driven development. But it's like it obscures what's going on. Like your hardest problem is transparency. What is the LM doing? And maybe you'll appreciate this, but what I had a hard time understanding myself, and what I had a hard time convincing people is that when I wanted to learn how to build a data-driven web app, and I started out in the 1990s, and it was terrible. It was hard. It took forever. I mean, like this is before we had HTML4 and CSS3. And so the underlying technology was changing. We had JBoss and we had these other different frameworks. They all sucked. None of them worked. No one ever wanted to use them. Everybody made their own custom code on Linux, right? And then we got HTML4, we got CSS3, we got JavaScript, and then Ruby on Rails came out, right? And it was like suddenly the foundation was solid, and I was like, this is unbelievable. That startup that I had to raise $5 million in 1998, I can now do in a couple of weeks. And so I got into this mindset of you start with a framework because it makes your life easier, and that has driven the software engineering community for the past 15 years to the point that there's engineers who don't really know anything other than like an active record with like the object relational mapping. They don't have they're looking for a framework. Understandably, they're going to start with LangChain, and it is a bad idea because it's going to it will obscure what's happening. Okay, that's enough ranting from an old man. Stop there. Anyway, we were talking about querying database. Sorry, did you want to say anything else on that topic before I get back to the relevant stuff?
I could talk about it for hours, maybe days, but I think I'm good for now.
Okay. All right. Okay. So going back to context window size. Okay. So for maybe somebody who does not understand the limitations of LLM and hasn't written a lot of SQL queries, besides maybe just using their relational database, why is context window size limitations and issues for having LLMs talk to a database?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure we get a lot of technical folks, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, basically when you use an LLM, you can only send in a certain number of words, a certain number of tokens. I think Gemini is the largest right now with a couple million. ChatGPT is about 128,000. That's not that much data when you think about it. Like a lot of the production databases I work with have billions, if it's a data analytics warehouse, it could have billions of rows.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are using an LLM to, let's say, pull data, if it's a simple SQL query, you will run into issues presenting all of those records, all of the results to an LLM. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe it's really just a simple SQL query. You download the results, you send them to your user as a CSV. But we run into this a lot where we're analyzing data that's stored in a SQL database, but it's unstructured. It could be survey results or answers from a survey. It could be sentiment, it could be words that we have to do sentiment analysis on.
Yep.
And you can't really run SQL on that. So what you have to do is pull the records and then use that like an LLM to analyze that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just download 10 million survey results and present them to an LLM. It's gonna crap out. So you have to develop techniques for finding ways around that. And that's why context windows are so important with SQL queries. You can't just take all the results and dump them into an LLM. You have to find ways around it.
Yeah, and even as the SQL sizes get, the context window sizes get bigger, there's the whole loss in the middle thing where LMs are just, they're just like context stuffing just is not working very well so far. So you have other techniques. So we've actually have a paper on this, and I think we wrote it a year ago. So I'm some of the memory is foggy. We called it scratch pads, but it was basically in memory and Python functions to handle a lot of the to avoid. That was one of the techniques that we found, making tools like Python tools to parse some of the stuff.
And I have to thank you for that, because I actually, use that technique, and it's one of the core techniques now that Locusive uses to manage context windows, and it helps a lot. For those of you who are watching who've never seen the Scratchpad stuff from Prolego, go check it out. It's super useful.
All right. Well, thank you, Shanif. So we know at least one person read that and used it, so I'll put a link in there, which is one of the challenging things about talking about this topic, because we're so far ahead of like the rest of the industry right now. Like we did this a year ago, and like no one was even running into the problem, so they weren't looking at the solution. But anyway, thank you for saying that. Okay, so let's get back to it. So how, like, let's maybe skipping the jargon, like from an engineering perspective, how do you deal with the context? Like, what are some techniques for dealing for context when there's limitations?
There's so we've developed sort of a high level heuristic for dealing with these things. So in our application, it acts as, you may have heard this term, an autonomous agent, where it talks back and forth with an LLM to figure out what to do in order to solve a user's request. For example, you might need to run a database query and then analyze the results and then run an LLM. Maybe you have to run a search engine if you're doing something different. So the first thing that we do is we actually, before we send in a new request to an LLM, we prune the context window of any duplicate information. So what does that mean? Let's say we ask an LLM to run a SQL query and it had an error. Then we'll ask it to run a query again. Well, we might be able to remove that first query with the error when we send in the new request to an LLM. When you send in a request, you guys know you have to send in a message history. So we can remove that from the message history, and that suddenly shrinks things. Or if you're doing something with a search engine and all of a sudden you got this web page that has like 10 million words on it, you might be able to remove that 10 million word context from the LLM's message history because it's not necessary. So first things first, removing duplicate information. Second thing is summarizing information that maybe you don't need the same level of details on. So like, let's say we've got a message history that's 35 messages long. You can probably summarize the first few messages in that because the LLM won't get as much use out of those messages. Then what we'll do is we'll truncate messages where it's okay to truncate those messages. For example, in a search request, like you said, you might be able to truncate the middle of the web page that comes back on the search request because it has less information. And then there's so these sorts of techniques you're able to do where you can essentially, what we do is we iteratively take a look at the longest message in a message history, the one that's contributing the most pain to the context window. We figure out if we can summarize, we figure out if we can remove it. If not, we try to summarize it. And if not, then we'll try to truncate it. And if you do this iteratively over the context window as a whole, and maybe you leave the system message alone and you leave the most recent message alone, you actually maintain a lot of the conversation and the information in the message history. I'm happy to go more technical, but that's the highest level of how we do it.
Yeah, that was great. I think that was at a level that I was able to follow what you're saying, and I'll even maybe summarize it at a higher level for people who are less technical. It's like you have to find ways of looking at the data and shrinking down to just what you need for the LLM to make the decision. The analogy that I often use in these situations, you think of the LLM, but in workshops, I think of it as like an intern, right? You're going to pass all this information to an intern and ask them to make a decision. Now, with the release of the O1 models, maybe we have to say that's a grad student, but the person has to reason through this. So you can't throw 10 million rows at your intern. You have to find a way to truncate this information. Yeah, great explanation. So then I guess in terms of your product, really the efficiency that you're offering customers is that you have a lot of these techniques built into the functions of your product. So if somebody needs to go have a particular set of data, relational, or structured or unstructured, semi-structured data, you have ways of more quickly configuring it to bring that down to a scale so that the LLM can make decisions with it. Is that a fair way of saying it?
That's exactly right. And one of the things you guys talked about in the Scratchpad was, you can't give the LLM every single piece of data that comes back from the database, but you can sort of tell it, look, this is what's contained in this particular variable. Here's how it's structured. And you as the LLM can tell me, maybe I need to run a Python calculation on it, or maybe I need to run a calculator on it. And I can then offload a lot of that calculation to a better tool. And so there are ways to do what you just mentioned, but that's exactly right. We're basically finding ways to let the LLM work with the data in a way that's manageable in memory without it running into context window issues.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show a question from Patrick Smith, also a longtime entrepreneur from a tech background and a close friend of mine. So MongoDB versus using relational databases. My experience is the data store is not as relevant because you're really dealing with the LLM's limitation, not the data storage unit's limitation, but maybe you have a different experience with this.
I'll be, sort of upfront. Most of our work from database perspectives has been around SQL. And so there's challenges. I think there's a couple of challenges here. First is querying the data, and then second is presenting it. From the perspective of querying it, SQL is good because it's structured and it follows patterns, but every database is different. MongoDB databases are going to run into the same issue where your collections all have different fields in them. So that's probably about the same, just like you said. And then presenting the information, again, the way we present information is by summarization, by previewing the top 10 records, by telling the LLM what's in it. So I think it's about the same with the MongoDB side of things. The harder part is you as the developer have to write the code that runs a particular query. Yeah. So now you have to make sure that the query that's produced from the LLM can work with your collection structure. So long way of saying, I don't think it matters too much. It's just a different challenge that you have to solve.
Yeah, different way of configuration, right? So another value proposition of a product that can manage those abstractions so you can connect any data store, right? Is that it?
Yeah.
I'm making your pitch for you. So.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So question from Ravish here, I'll just translate this. I want to learn about deep Gen AI, like fine-tuning Agentic AI, RAG, etc. Right now working as a business analyst with surface level use cases like summarize, sentiment, NER, and everything. Yeah. So this is kind of what I tell everybody right now is that there really are it's changing too fast. And there are no good courses out there. The only really way I see people learn this right now is to jump in and start doing it. And I think starting with the text-based things like classification, summarize, entity extraction is the right way to begin because you can spin up something really quickly. I'll take some of the other ones and then I guess Shanif, I'll let you. But like RAG, RAG, the challenge is just getting the right context to the LLM. So you're going to be dealing with mostly a lot of parsing documents to get the right information in there. Agentic AI, I'll leave that up to you, Shanif. And fine tuning, just don't do it. Don't even bother learning it because honestly, we fine tuned BERT models for 5 years. That was our whole business. Fine tuning is hard. You got to make sure it takes specialized skills. You have to have highly curated data. And it's expensive, it's difficult, and it's probably going to be a waste of your time because the next foundational model will probably render a lot of your fine-tuning obsolete. So do not do fine-tuning until you absolutely need it. And you'll need it if you follow a methodology like I'm advocating, performance-driven development, where you put your tasks into some kind of structured spreadsheet and test them to see how well you're working. And if you find you need fine tuning, then go do it. But otherwise, don't do it at all. All right, let's talk about agentic AI, Shanif, because you have written a lot about this, and I think you've got some great opinions on this one.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't heard this term, agentic AI is sort of the term that came around last year. The concept is, when you used to develop software, and even today, when you develop software, it's very imperative. You tell the system what to do in every scenario, and your system can only support the scenarios that you have coded it to support. Agentic AI, or agents, is a system where you provide a software system with a set of tools and actions that it can take, and you ask the system to reason through the series of actions that it has to take to accomplish some particular objective. So for example, if you've got a chatbot and your users are using it and your users asking, like, hey, what's the weather in New York tomorrow? Maybe your agent has access to a search engine, and maybe it also has access to like a database and then a document tool. When your user sends in this request, your system has to realize, hey, I need to use the search engine or a web browser. I need to run the search engine with this query. I need to analyze the results. Could be a 3 or 4 step process. That's what an agent is. And agentic AI is basically leveraging an LLM to make a decision at every step about what to do and whether the results are sufficient for answering a user. There are a lot of good tutorials out there. So, Kevin mentioned just get started. I would say the best way to do it is to just get started. I got started, as much as we, rag on some of the other open source frameworks out there, I got started by just reading their code. I was like, okay, here's how they're doing things. And it's really straightforward.
Yep.
It really is just a series of, it's a loop. And in each step of the loop, you're basically doing a couple of things. You're asking the agent to select a tool, you're running the tool, you're analyzing the results, you're deciding if you're done. And you can go ahead and implement something like that yourself in about an afternoon or 2. Now, when you start to implement this for production level systems, it becomes complicated, just like everything does. But to get started, and this sort of holds true with everything related to software, in my experience, just go and do it. You're going to teach yourself along the way. And that's the best software engineers I've learned just taught themselves.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about looking at the framework's code, because now that I spent the 10 minutes bagging on LangChain, I will say that, like, especially like Llama Index is a great one, that team, and even some of the LangChain contributors, going in and looking at what they're doing and how they're doing it, you can get up to speed very fast. You will just probably find that you're better off taking the learnings from how to do configurations and then creating your own configurations and interfaces from that. In fact, I think I have a video called like "Learn from LangChain but don't use it," something like that. Anyway, strong opinion weekly held. So happy to be proven wrong by somebody else. All right,
I agree.
Anyway, great explanation from agents. The only thing I would add to that is that when we first started using them, we tried. I was like, "This is amazing! I can do everything with an agent. I have everything with the LLM. It'll like do this, and you can just start sending a million messages back and forth." And so what we found is like that would work, but it would also take 30 minutes to run one query and cost $5. So I was like, this isn't going to work. And so knowing when to optimize the LLM, and obviously, the faster inference, Grok, this is all going to make this cheaper LLMs, better LLMs. Like, it's all moving in the right direction, but you cannot offloading everything to the LLM is going to get you a slow, expensive, inefficient system. And, customers aren't going to sit around and waiting 5 minutes for your answer.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. So great information. So I was going to jump into more. I think some of a lot of the technical issues we wanted to cover. I wanted to maybe jump into some of the opportunity discovery, as an entrepreneur, founder, side hustle. But before I get into that, anything else technically we didn't cover? If you think we need to hit on building products with LLMs, things people should know.
I would say, just as a high level takeaway, I think for me, the hardest thing about building an LLM enabled app is the pipelining and the infrastructure. It's really easy to get started with an LLM. You can come up with prompts. Like, yes, I've done a lot of prompt engineering, but like if you're plugging into someone's data source, you need to make sure that data source is refreshed and it's up to date and it is constantly indexed. And so it becomes purely a software, not purely, but mostly a software and data play. So just keep that in mind. It's easy to get started, but it does take a lot of effort. And if you're building this internally, you're going to have to dedicate resources. Like, you can't build something for the long term without thinking.
But wait, isn't the AI is going to replace software engineers and do all the work, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier. You guys are hiring software engineers. I'm looking for engineers. It's going to be, I think, a brave new world of software engineering, and I
Yeah.
don't think they're going away. I think we're just going to need more and better software engineers.
Yeah, I agree too. I think the golden era of software engineering is coming. Right, and we've gone through this tech downturn, and the companies now are hesitant to hire and everything, and they're quote investing in AI. Most of them are not investing in AI.
Yeah.
Most of them are just talking about it, or they've got a side project. But yeah, I completely agree. This is I've talked about this before, but the we have such a dramatic shortage of software in the world, right? And I look at all the problems in a business. The reason every manager doesn't have a team of 5 software engineers solving all their problems is that it's too expensive, right?
Yeah.
But when you think when one engineer or 2 engineers have like 20x output for what they're able to produce, it doesn't mean we're going to have fewer engineers. It means we're going to have more software because there's such a shortage. I mean, just think about how like inefficient most people's business day is, and that's going to drive demand. So I see the golden era of software engineering happening. Like, for parents out there, don't listen to what you're hearing about software engineers, going away. Send your kids to engineering school, and whatever they learn, it will be the thinking process they learn will be useful for them. Anyway, brief rant on that topic. Anything you want to add to that, Shanif?
No, I agree. I think in the short term, we are very good to go. And the hardest thing, you guys have probably seen this, is not necessarily the engineering, but the deployments, the infrastructure, the SRE stuff. And you're going to need people who know how to do that, because despite how good LLMs are, it's very unlikely they're going to connect into like a Google Cloud and set up everything and set up monitoring and stuff. So 100%, like I agree.
Real easy to get the first 80% going. And that last 50%,
Yeah.
that's when you're gonna need a team, or you're gonna need a product like yours. All right, so let's jump into some of the questions about. I think we covered this one on how a mid-level software engineer can get started. This was an interesting one. Like, suppose there's a programmer out there, a data scientist, who kind of wants to start a side hustle, and they want to start building solutions with LLMs and making some money on the side. How should that person start? What kind of problems do you think they should look for? You're out there slugging away at this every day. So what do you think they should know?
I feel this pretty intently, because when I first started, I think I mentioned one of the biggest learnings I had in startup life was to not build stuff that nobody wants. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, I knew LLMs were going to be pretty big. I think they're going to be the biggest platform to build upon since mobile. And so for me, I was like, what is it worth working on? So I did a lot of consulting just to get started, like just working one-on-one with companies to understand what they wanted, and building into their stacks and building some quick apps and applications. So if you're looking to get started and it's just a side hustle and you don't want to take it further, you just want to learn, I would say you could probably scratch your own itch. There's got to be something that you can do for yourself. Like, do you want to post on LinkedIn more, automated? Do you want to send emails? Do you just want something that can look up your emails and find the most relevant emails? Like, these are lots of problems you can start on. Now, if you're looking at something that can turn into a business, or you hope that one day it can add value, then you probably should do what I did, which is discovery, trying to figure out what are the problems people have, where are the commonalities, what are the patterns, and sort of take it a little bit more seriously. But no matter what, just get started, just get started, because too many people focus on the analysis and they just don't get started. And with any project, whether it's a startup or a side hustle or a hobby, you just have to get started so that you can learn what you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I don't have much more to add to that, except that I'll sprinkle maybe as an idea for some people that I don't have like time to pursue myself. But I've often thought there's going to be an opportunity for people launching, single 2-founder small businesses using LLMs for other small businesses where they're just leveraging the API of whatever the tools they have. So, usually building an LLM-based solution that connects MailChimp and QuickBooks. I mean, I don't know if or MailChimp and HubSpot, or I guess they probably don't have both those, but they're like their transaction system, their customer support system, or email, finding ways to bring that data together and add value, because the way companies like small businesses really can't do that. They can't hook up Zapier and do analysis, but they can talk to a chat interface. And if there's ways, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to make small side businesses doing that kind of simple integration and support for other small businesses. So I don't know if that's an opportunity or not. I know I'm not going to pursue it because I got too many other things going on, but that was one, if I was looking for a side hustle, that's the kind of thing I would look for.
I love it. It's a great idea.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Shanif, thank you so much. Anything else you want to tell everybody before we kind of wrap up here?
Good luck and just get started. I think, as you mentioned, Kevin, these LLMs are getting better and better. So just high level general advice, don't bet against them. Skate to where the puck is going. Like in our business, I'm assuming LLMs are going to have near instantaneous speed. They're going to be perfect reasoning engines, and they're going to be pretty smart. So what does that mean? Well, there's an opportunity to leverage them for your internal data, which they're probably never going to have access to. There's probably an opportunity to leverage the pipes and build the pipes. So just think about that as you're getting started.
Absolutely love it. I tell this to founders, and I know Sam Altman talks about this. I tell this to our executives in workshops, like in your plan, bake in exponentially improving LLMs. And that means they're going to get exponentially on speed, on intelligence, and a falling cost. And think about what your company and your environment looks like when that curve keeps going up like this, because that's the direction everything is going. And obviously that's the bet you've made. So Shanif, thank you so much. So where can people learn more about your work and Locusive and then follow you?
I appreciate it.
Some promotion here.
Yeah, no. Well, if you're interested in what we're doing, our website has a lot of information. It's locusive.com, Locusive. I post a lot on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me. And if you need to get in touch, I'm Shanif at locusive.com, Shanif. I really appreciate the time, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, this has been an absolute joy. And I would just tell you, if you are CIO, CTO, you're a technology buyer out there, you have a long line of people in your office coming and talking about AI and everything their product says. And I can promise you 99% of those people either don't know what they're talking about or they've just bolted AI onto their existing product. And ultimately, they're likely not going to be around in a couple of years, or if they are, they're going to disappoint. I can promise you, I don't know if Locusive is the right match for your company, but I can tell you the entrepreneur here knows what they're doing and he's genuine about his doing it. And if you're going to take a bet on somebody, I would bet on Shanif.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Shanif. Really appreciate your advice, everyone, and thanks for making such great content.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to talk to you. Bye now.